We're going to go right now to Chris Benoit. And, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, Chris, it's a pleasure to have you on, especially this week, coming off of the match on Monday. We've got a bunch of callers for you, but before, I wanted to ask you about, did you feel any unusual pressure, since it was kind of, the situation was this the most pressure-packed you had ever gone into the ring feeling, or you've been in matches that you felt more pressure under?
No, there was absolutely no pressure at all. It was
really
was more emotional for me. I felt pressure before in different matches, but there was absolutely no pressure at all to do good or whatever. It was pure emotion. I mean, it was very, very emotional day for me, just walking into that building and being there and being in the ring with especially Brett, and it was very extremely emotional. Probably the most emotional match I've ever been in.
Now, do you save a lot of tapes of your matches?
Somewhat, yeah. Some of them I do. That's one of them I'll definitely keep.
Okay, because I know that Nitro, of course, that match there was basically about 5-6 minutes of the match that were not seen on television due to a commercial break. But there are people out there who have, KU band satellite receivers that can get the backhaul feed of Nitro. And I know, because someone had actually contacted me, there are tapes of that match unedited, with whatever happened during the commercial breaks out there.
Oh, that'd be great. If you could get your hands on that, I'd appreciate a copy of that.
Yeah, because I'm going to call somebody up who called me up about that, and I was going to, tell him to probably, try to get a hold of a tape for me and also a tape for you, and I would assume that Bret Hart would probably want one as well.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'd say the most meaningful show that I've ever done in my whole career was the one for Brian Hildebrand in Knoxville last year, and the most meaningful match would have to be this one that I did for Owen.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very emotional for me. I can't imagine what Brett was going through.
Yeah, I know. Especially, I think that my impression is that Brett felt a lot of pressure that, for a lot of reasons, I think he felt that he needed to have a great match, or else he would almost let the memory of his brother down. And luckily for him, he was in the ring with you, and I thought you were just phenomenal in the match, and I thought he was as well.
Thank you very much.
But it was, we don't often, in fact, I think in the history of Nitro, we've never had a chance to see a near 30-minute match.
Yeah, Brett and I had discussed the match prior to going into the ring, and we thought, it may sound selfish of that, and I'm never like that, but we both talked and we both thought, well, let's just do this one for ourselves and for Owen, mostly for Owen. Let's not worry about, what the people are going to think, or if they choose to cheer for someone and not cheer for the other. Let's just go out there and put our hearts and souls and just let it flow, and thank God it ended up being a very good match. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, you should be very proud of it. Let's go to the phones. We've got Leon from Brooklyn on.
Hi, Dave. How's the week been?
It's been an interesting week here. First week, a few technical glitches, but every day it's more and more fun. I thought yesterday's show was a lot of fun, and I think today's show is going to be a lot of fun as well.
I just want to say, Chris is he's a very good wrestler, and I'd like to know, Chris, what's your training regimen? Because you're obviously in very good shape. So how do you train every day, or how do you go about keeping your body in shape? I
train as much as I can. I just go by how I feel. Usually when we're on the road, it's so it's very inconsistent. I may be on the road for 10 days and have 4 days off, then on the road for 2. There's no real schedule, so I just I go by how I feel when I get up in the morning. I try to make it in there at least 5 times a week.
Actually,
how much? Let me ask you, how much cardio do you do, and how much weights do you do, and do you do what other and do you do anything else besides those two things?
No, I just do weights and cardio really. I do a lot of stretching. I do a lot of bridges. That's one thing I've never stopped doing ever since I spent that year in Japan in the dojo. I really learned how to bridge there, and that's one thing that I do on a daily basis. But in terms of cardio, I'll do that when I feel like it, probably 2-3 times a week. But I hit the weights more hard than I do the cardio.
Now, if you hit a lot of cardio, do you sense your weight going down? And do you do things as far as diet, as far as to keep your weight up? Or some guys diet to keep their weight down. Some guys, diet to push their weight up. And I know that you're naturally a smaller guy than most of the wrestlers. Mm-hmm. Do you make yourself eat 6 meals a day, or is your eating just kind of well, I'm on the road and I just, eat when I get the chance, kind of.
Yeah, not really. It's just common sense eating. I try not to eat fried food and low-fat foods, and I hit, 2 or 3 protein drinks a day. So just real common sense eating. I'm not really regimented to any diet.
Okay, Leon, do you have more questions for me?
Yeah, I actually have a comment. I work for Fox News, and the 2 guests are going to be Jim Varsalone with the Miami Herald.
From the Fort Lauderdale, or Miami Herald. Miami Herald, yeah.
And Bob Peters, I think he's a media.
Media and morality. Oh, geez, well, I kind of wish that I was on because I actually would have enjoyed debating him.
And, my final question is, Chris, do you think wrestling is ever going to get back to a point where we can have 30-minute matches, or do you think that's pretty much long gone?
Well, you just seen it last Monday.
Yes.
So, I never say never. It depends who's in there creatively and what they want. And you watch pay-per-views and you get those kind of matches sometimes. So I don't know if you'll get it out of one show, like a whole show being that. But I don't know if that'll ever happen. But I don't think that'll ever die.
Okay. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I hope that won't die because watching that match, it was something. In the last 5 minutes of the match, I guess I was very nostalgic for. It reminded me of matches that I'd seen a lot in the 80s involving Ric Flair, where he would do like a 30-minute match with Barry Windham or somebody like that. You're probably familiar, or one of the really top wrestlers, or Ricky Steamboat. And I hadn't seen a 30-minute match in the United States anyway for a long, long time. I don't even remember the last one, and it was. I just thought that it was a very refreshing type of match, and it was good that it got over. Before the match, when I sort of heard how long it was, there's always that fear that, today's fan doesn't have the attention span there, sometimes on TV, you see matches go 8-9 minutes and the people lose interest. So I was glad to see how well it came across and how well it's been received ever since.
Yeah, I kind of feel that the fans in a way felt the same way that Brett and I did, that it was for Owen and it was somewhat of a tribute to Owen. So I think they appreciated it in that way also.
I think the fans live really appreciate it. Let's go to John right now in Mamaroneck,
New York, Dave.
Mamaroneck, New York. Okay.
I've been on for quite a few days. Chris, I got to tell you right now, you have to be the most solid athlete out there today. You come off as being a hybrid of Bret Hart, Dynamite Kid, and Bruiser Brody.
Thank you.
I mean, it's incredible to see you perform. Last year, I remember reading through the Observer that you were doing the contract negotiations with WCW. How close did you come to jumping to Titan? During the negotiations.
Pretty close, actually. I sat down with Eric and talked to him about how unhappy I was with storylines and how I felt that I wasn't contributing at all, and that goes back to spending all that time in Japan and all that, and a lot of tours I'd be over there, I'd be the first match for the whole tour, but after every match you walked out of there and you felt like you were part of a team, and that was my biggest complaint, is that there was no team spirit. I never felt like I was part of a team in WCW, and when I sat down with Eric, he promised me that things would change and assured me that changes were in the making and all that, and I figured I'd been with the company. Most of my good friends are with WCW, so I opted to stay.
With Eric now gone and Vince Russo who's going to be running the show pretty soon, do you feel more comfortable in where you are? And since you re-signed under Eric's terms, do you feel more comfortable with what Russo might be able to do for you?
Well, I don't know Vince Russo personally, but from what I understand, he's a real, he's into the characters and developing characters, and that's one thing that I've always had a lot of ambition in doing, and that I felt that I lack. I'm very weak in interviews and that, and character-wise, and that's something that I'd really like to develop in myself. And having someone like Vince Russo and then watching what he's done for guys up in New York it's very exciting. And I speak for a lot of the younger guys also. Guys that I know that they're just very excited in having him come in. Just in watching the inconsistency in storylines that WCW's had in the last couple of years. Having someone in there that'll be on top of all that is very refreshing.
In a way, you're very similar to Bret Hart in that a lot of people have had their best matches with you. I remember seeing you in a match with Jerry Lawler here in New Jersey quite a few years back. And, I mean, even you made Jerry Lawler a credible athlete 20 years past, his prime, who really, stands in the spotlight of praised you after a match of saying, you've really taken me to the limit?
Who has done that?
Yeah.
No one really stands out. I mean, it takes two in there.
That's true.
I feel that, the guy I'm as good as the guy that I'm in the ring with is with me. So it's.
I mean, you're both out there trying to make each other look good at all points.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I can't stand these guys that have these attitudes and these egos about looking too strong or getting beat, or it's nonsense.
What kind of a character do you envision for yourself? I remember when Paulie tried to craft you as a crippler, but without the mic skills. What do you see yourself as an actor / wrestler?
I don't know. I get a lot of people that come up to me and say, well, you should watch some Clint Eastwood movies, some Dirty Harry movies.
Yeah.
That's, I myself, I'd like to sit down with Vince Russo and throw some stuff around.
Well, Chris and Dave, it's been a pleasure speaking to both of you. You guys take care and have a good evening.
Thank
Thanks
you.
Bye-bye. Okay, Chris, this brought up something that I wanted to ask you about. You're looking forward to going to Japan. I guess you're going in about a week or two, right?
Yeah, I leave on Wednesday.
Okay, so you're leaving on Wednesday for a little over a 1 week tour, is it?
Yeah, I'll be gone for 10 days.
Yeah. When was the last time
tour, I guess.
What?
It's a 1 week tour, I guess, but I'll be gone for 10 days. So.
Yeah. How long has it been since you've wrestled Japan?
A couple of years now.
This has been a couple of years. Wow. So
yeah.
I mean, and a lot of people know this. Some people may not. That a lot of your early training, you actually started with Stampede Wrestling, but very early in Chris's career. I think you were about 20 years old when you first went to Japan. Is that right?
Yeah, I was 19.
You were 19. Wow.
Yeah.
And there's two things well, actually later in the show I want to get into how you got there in the first place, but you pretty much grew up as a disciple of the Japanese system of wrestling. One thing that was really interesting to me is I noticed a lot of guys and like you and Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, all I guess probably met in Japan and wrestled for New Japan Pro Wrestling at the same time in the same type of matches back and forth. And your matches were, middle of the card, junior heavyweight matches. You had a few main events in Japan, but you didn't have that many. Mm-hmm. Yet it didn't seem like, and you sort of addressed this, it didn't seem like anybody was unhappy there as far as you understood that this was the position you were in. You were in there with great guys, Yushin Liger, Otani, those type of people. Yet here, it seems that there's a lot of the guys are very frustrated because they can't take, or up until this point anyway, no one has been given the chance to take the next step. What's the difference between, wrestling in Japan and the U.S. as far as that mentality?
Morale, total morale. I mean, I've never worked for a company that has had as bad a morale as WCW's had in the last while, and it sucks to say that, but it's the truth. And working over in Japan, it's like I said, I go over there for some tours and be first, second match for the whole tour. But man, I'd walk out of that ring and just feel like I was on top of the world and doing what I love doing and having everyone appreciate it. And over here in WCW, it's just different. It's you get guys that change in separate locker rooms and you'd never get you get talked down to and just total. It wasn't a good atmosphere. And to me, once you take morale away, the company falls apart.
We've got Luke from Arcadia, California. Go ahead, Luke.
Hey, Chris. Just wanted to say it's an honor to talk to you.
Thank you, Luke.
Just wanted to say that your match with Bret Hart on Monday was the absolute best match I've seen all year, hands down.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Like I said before, it meant a lot to me, so to hear that is it's a great compliment. Thank you.
Because it just totally reinstilled my faith in pro wrestling.
Thank you very much.
I think you and Bret should really be congratulated for that.
Thank you.
I guess what my question is with Russo and Ferrara coming in, it looks like WCW might be getting ready to make a run at catching the WWF in the ratings. I guess if there's one thing that you could pick that WCW isn't doing right now that they should be doing, what would that be?
Right now?
Yeah.
Lack of leadership. I mean, there's too many guys making decisions, and there's lack of direction, which causes lack of direction, I guess. There's you go to one person and get one answer, and to another person get a totally opposite answer, and not know which way to go. So it's lack of direction.
Okay.
Is that it?
I had a question for Dave.
Sure.
Do you guys plan on putting up archives of the old shows?
Of these shows? I believe that there's a plan to do that. I'm not sure how everything's working technically in New York right now, but yeah, I mean, that's been discussed with me, and I know that the plan certainly is to keep these shows available where, like, you don't have to listen to it from 6 to 8. You could, get it any time during the day. But I'm pretty sure that is going to happen. Yeah.
Dave, I don't mean to butt in. This is Alan New York here. We hope to have the archives up sometime, either if not tonight, without a doubt by early next week. Hopefully by Monday, if not Tuesday at the latest.
Okay. I guess I was just told that the archives will probably be up tonight or tomorrow, Monday at the latest. So we are going to have all these shows archived. That's good to know. Jason in Nashville, are you there?
Yeah, I had a couple questions for Chris, but first comment. He said he didn't feel he was real strong on interviews, but I thought the one time he was given a chance during the Kevin Sullivan feud, he was great, especially that interview in the restaurant where he said, "How does it feel to be a loser?" But I thought he was really good the times he was given a chance on interviews. The questions I had were about Japan. How much time did you get, or as far as getting to know the guys outside the ring, some of the Japanese wrestlers, were you able to get to know them at all?
Well, because of the language barrier, it was limited. But when I spent that year over there, I was living in the dojo and traveling with a lot of them, so I got to know some of them pretty well. But when you're on tour over there, I mean, the only real time you get to spend with them is at the arena, and if you go with a couple of them after the matches. But I've got some very good friends over there, yes.
And the other question I had was, there was a match in Japan where you went to the top rope and you did the airplane headbutt all the way to the floor. And I was wondering if you took any special precautions, like to protect your knees, to keep them from blowing out. Did you wear any extra padding or anything like that?
No, I didn't. No, just something crazy, and something crazy I did. And I remember I nearly blew my shoulder out on that. I don't think I'd ever do it again, but back then it was a little more in less regard for myself than I am now. I don't think I'd ever try that again.
Chris, did you get a chance to talk to Harley Race in Kansas City?
Briefly backstage. He'd shown up with his wife, and we spoke for a little while, and that was it.
Yeah, because I remember, I don't know if the first guy I ever saw do the diving headbutt was Harley Race, and I don't know if he went to Calgary. I don't know where, I know Dynamite Kid did it a lot in Calgary. I don't know if Dynamite Kid learned it in England. I'm not sure. I just remember, in the 70s, Harley Race was the first guy to do that move.
Yeah, from what I hear, he's the first guy to ever have done it.
Yeah.
Off the top like that, so.
When you trained in Japan, was Funaki training at the same time that you were there?
Yes, he was.
Yeah, how was, a lot of people don't know, a lot of people don't know who Funaki is, and then some people do as far as the pancrafts and the shoot fighting and everything, but I remember when Funaki first broke in, my feeling was when I first saw him, and Chris, you were in Japan, I know you were in Japan at this time because this is late 80s, that he was going to be probably, of all those young guys, I thought he was going to be the biggest star of them all, and then he chose a different direction. I was just wondering, what you thought, because he was probably 15, 16 years old probably when you first met him.
Yeah, actually, I had my very first match ever in Japan was against him.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was. But he was always he always showed tremendous athletic ability when in the dojo. I mean, he was, out of all the guys that were in the dojo at the time, he was, by far the most athletic and the most talented when it came to wrestling and submission wrestling. And when he broke off and went off into submission wrestling, I thought for sure he was gonna, he climbed the ladder very quickly, and I thought he was gonna step there for quite a while.
I think, especially now because Funaki's about 30 years old and he's been doing that stuff for a long time, I think it'd be really good for him to come back to pro wrestling, to kind of save his body and kind of, he could be, especially in Japan where he's made his rep in one thing, he can go into New Japan. It's a natural, I think it's a natural thing for him at some stage.
I'd love to see him come back. I mean, like, as I said, and I remember in the dojo, I mean, he was so talented and he picked things up so quickly. I think he'd be very successful in professional wrestling.
Now, Jason, are you still on the phone?
Yeah.
Okay, do you have any more questions?
Last one was just, what was the worst injury he suffered in the ring? Because he wrestles a really physical style.
The worst I've ever suffered in the ring?
The worst injury.
Probably something. One time I took like a rana over the top rope in Japan, but from Sabu, and I landed like, instead of landing on my back on the outside on the mat, I landed on my shoulder, and I thought I'd broken my shoulder, but fortunately I hadn't. But that was probably the worst. I wasn't able to move or train for a couple of weeks.
Now, when you well, I guess it was you had the elbow injury that kept you out for a couple months, I guess last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very fortunate, though. It was just a torn ligament, and I had the operation, which was successful, and I didn't lose too much. I don't think I really lost anything, any strength or anything out of that arm. Recuperated very well.
Steve from Brooklyn, you're on the air.
Yeah, Chris, I think you're one of the best wrestlers out there right now, if not the best. And I think your match on Monday was a great wrestling match, and I really didn't want it to end. And I understand the finish, but I would like to see a draw too, though. But I was wondering, what would you think about working with Vampiro?
Working with him?
Yeah.
I'd like to have that opportunity. I love working with all kinds of different styles, and he works this kick style, and he's got a lot of lucha style to him. I think we'd be able to have a great match, and I look forward to the day that we're able to step into the ring and have some time in the match that we could test each other.
Okay. You have any other questions, Steve?
No, I just wanted to say that I think that he should definitely be elevated to the top, and definitely should be like a world champion real soon.
Thank you, Steve. I'm glad that you appreciated the match I had with Brett.
Yeah, I really appreciate the wrestling aspect more than the angles and all that other stuff, the interviews.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will say this, among people who, really, really follow wrestling closely, they really appreciate your match because you're, it's no nonsense and you work hard and, no laziness and it's a very believable style. It's not just flashy moves that sometimes hit and sometimes miss. And, there's people who like that too. There's room for all forms of wrestling, but to do the style that you do and as solid as you do, it's I don't know, it's one of my favorite styles as well. And a lot of people, I think a lot of people don't know this, but you've probably, Mike Tay brought this up actually on Monday night, that you and Owen Hart probably wrestled in more different places and were successful in more different places than just about anyone, because of U.S., Canada, Mexico, Japan, Europe. Germany, yeah, exactly. Comparing all those different styles, I mean, what's your favorite? And you've kind of blended in a little bit of all of them into your style now.
My favorite would probably, I enjoy wrestling over in Japan the most. But right now I'm in the States and I feel very challenged. Like I said before, I want to develop my interview skills. I want to develop more of a character. And that's a big challenge to me, and I hope I have the opportunity to do that, because it's something that I like to prove not only to myself but to a lot of fans out there.
We've got Jeff in San Jose on. Jeff.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, Chris, you're always getting compared to the Dynamite Kid of the '80s, which is a great compliment. But I'm wondering, I watch you all these diving headbutts, off the top of the cage. I'm wondering, are you concerned you can end up like the Dynamite Kid of the '90s, which is, of course, confined to a wheelchair, due in part to all the crazy bumps he's taken over the years?
If it's a matter of over time, over taking bumps over a period of years, I don't think so. I try to really take care of myself, and I watch my diet, and I take supplements, and when I'm injured, I nurse the injury. In terms of something weird or something freaky happening, that's totally unforeseen, and stuff like that does happen.
Did you have any thoughts when you got the news about Darren Drozdoff or anything like that? I mean, was it in the? I guess the guys haven't. Have you wrestled since Tuesday night?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, I was just wondering what the feeling would be in the locker room, because if you had one of those things where it's it's just a freak thing. It can happen to anyone at any day. Just you know what I'm saying. It wasn't like it wasn't, it wasn't something done stupid. It was just one of those things that happen in sports, really.
Yeah, most definitely can happen to anyone at any given time. You look at what happened to Bagwell with Rick Steiner. I mean, it's just a freak thing, and stuff like that does happen. And I don't know him, but I mean, my thoughts have been with him all week, and it's just stuff like that. There's really nothing you could do about it. I mean, we take all the precautions that we can, and we try to be as safe as we can. But those kind of things happen, unfortunately.
A lot of people, when something like this happens, and the media's really come out and goes, is wrestling, out of control. And sometimes wrestling, I think, is out of control, and sometimes it isn't. But the situation, sometimes when I look at this, I think that it's a real testament to the guys and how good they are, that things like this don't happen more. And that's one of the things that concerns me, I guess, of, backyard wrestling, because you have guys who aren't trained, and then they're trying to do some of these things. And Chris trained for, a long time in Canada and a long time in Japan. And, it wasn't easy training. It wasn't just like you walked in the ring one day and started doing these diving headbutts.
No, but I remember when I was, I was 13, 14 years old watching Stampede Wrestling, and we'd go in the backyard and we'd be suplexing each other on the grass and, doing pile drivers. And I mean, I did that when I was a teenager too.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Jeff, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, did you feel slighted at all that a bigger deal wasn't made of that headbutt off the top of the cage on Thunder? Because to me, that's almost as dangerous as the Mankind fall from the Hell in Cell.
I didn't feel slighted. I just thought it was, poor on production or whoever's decision not to exploit that and use that. I mean, I just thought, well, that's kind of crazy. They should have shown it a little more, or whenever someone has a good match or something, talk about it more. I mean, one of the worst things on watching Nitro is when you're in the middle of a match and they start talking about something else. I talk about the match that's taking place and what's going on in the ring. But that's beyond my decision, so nothing I can really do about it.
Jeff, anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. There's a few years ago you were wrestling for ECW, and I guess at that point in time you had some tryout matches with the WWF, and I guess there was also when you, Chris, and you, Dean, and Eddie Guerrero all came to WCW. At that point in time, there was also a decision, WWF or WCW. What was your thoughts, between the two organizations at that point?
Well, I went up to WWF and talked to Vince, and I worked 3 shows there. One of which was with Owen, which probably the best out of the 3 shows, the best match I had out of the 3 shows. But New Japan had more of a working relationship with WCW then, which meant a lot to me because I didn't want to break ties with New Japan. And Eric had assured me that I'd be able to go back, quite periodically to Japan on tours several times a year, which was a big influence.
Now, do you have your favorite Chris Benoit match, the match that you would, if you were trying to send a resume tape out or something like this to say, this is the favorite match that I've had, and also as a fan, maybe growing up or even as a pro wrestler over the last 13, 14 years that you've been wrestling, where you would say, this is, or maybe a few matches where you say, these are the best match I've ever seen. I'm in awe of this match. Like, what stands out in your mind?
Yeah, it's too hard to say. I mean, I've had so many great matches, which like in Japan and on little spot shows in way out towns, like with Eddie Guerrero, that people that that wasn't televised, that people never get to see, or with Liger or Otani or Malenko. So it's hard to pick. It's hard to pick one match, and I look at things that that mean something to me emotionally, and to me the most is the match that I had with Brett for Owen. I've had to pick one match that meant something to me emotionally. But in terms of great matches, for the entertainment or the wrestling that was entailed in it, I couldn't pick one.
What did you ever when you were wrestling in Mexico? You never met Rey Mysterio Jr. at that point, did you?
No.
Okay.
No.
The first time that you would have met him when he first came to WCW in that maybe Baltimore pay-per-view?
No, it was in Japan.
It was in Japan. Okay.
Yeah, it was for I guess a junior tournament or something. And
so you were in that Super J Cup where he wrestled Psychosis.
Yeah, right? That was it. That was the first time I'd ever seen him, and I was just wow.
Now, because I just remember the first time that I met Rey Mysterio Jr. and he was probably 14, 15 years old, and it sort of reminded me of people whenever the first time they see him, not wrestling, but the first time you see him, because he was actually not wrestling on the show. I saw he was walking, just walking in the stands, and somebody goes, "Oh, that's Colibri," which was the name that he wrestled, and he was maybe, I don't know, 110 pounds. Mm-hmm. And your thought of what a pro wrestler looks like, I'm going like, are you ribbing me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what was your reaction? Because, as far as, like, there have been smaller guys in, like, the original Tiger Mask, and Liger's was short, although he's very powerful. To see a guy that size, was it just basically that you heard enough about him, or did you just, was there like a momentary go like, wait a minute, I've heard this name, but he's a little too small, or was it just, oh no, I know about this guy, or I've seen him on tape, and he's phenomenal, and not even give a second thought?
No, I don't really think of it like that. I find wrestling it's a form of art, and I don't look at people based on their size or anything like that. I based on their ability and what they could do in there. And I've been a Rey Mysterio fan ever since the first time I seen him in the ring. I've been a Psychosis fan ever since the first time I seen him in the ring, which was with Rey Mysterio. They just complement each other so well. But I judge based on ability and not on size. So whether he's 6'10" or 5 feet or whatever he may be. Anywhere in between. I base it on their athletic ability and what they can do in the ring.
Yeah, I remember in Mexico, and I don't know if you ever wrestled him. You may have. There was a wrestler, Super Astra, who was actually, I think, shorter than Rey Mysterio Jr. And the first time I saw him, it was just like, wow, this guy. There was no question that he belonged, and he was great.
Yeah.
Did you ever wrestle him or see him?
Yeah, I've wrestled with him before. Yeah. So, getting in the ring, especially going down there, was such a shock. I'd come out of, doing a 3-4 week tour in Japan and go right down there, and it's what a difference, contrast in styles, and that's extremely huge learning experience spending that time down there in Mexico.
We're going to go right to the calls in just a second, but before we do, Chris, I want to talk to you about a real good friend of yours, Brian Hildebrand, and just some comments on Brian. I know that you were probably as close to him as just about anyone in the wrestling business.
Yeah, Brian was without a doubt, the most inspirational person I've ever met. Just being around him, he never complained once about anything. Just loved life and lived life, and I got a lot of respect and a lot of admiration for people like that. There's so many people around that whine and complain about little things, and it's constant. And Brian was just, an outgoing guy who was, a very true person.
Yeah, the one thing that I remember with Brian, and I talked to him, several times, he never complained, and he was always, talking about, it was always like, there wasn't even, in his voice, he didn't even quiver or waver of, I'm going to be back, I'm going to be back on Nitro in 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and I would feel sad, and he would just go, hey, don't worry, I'll be back, I'll be on TV in 2 months, back at work, and it was very inspiring to me as well, and I know, that you saw him in Cincinnati, and then again at that show in Ross River, Pennsylvania, and that was a really great night. I thought that was one of the best nights of the year for wrestling, and I missed Knoxville, but in Ross River, PA, because it was like a whole bunch of guys from different companies, Mick Foley and Chris Jericho, and I don't want to slide anyone, D'Lo Brown, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, yourself, Shane Douglas, and so many of the other guys. They were all together, and it had nothing to do with politics of wrestling, and it had nothing really to do with money or anything like that. Everybody just wanted, to show their appreciation for Brian.
Yeah, it was truly, truly a moment in my career, a moment in wrestling, for that matter, that'll never be forgotten. And it's great, even when we do the Brian Pillman memorials, to have all the guys come together like that with no politics and no ulterior motives, just going out there for a cause is something that's really incredible.
Yeah, let's go to Scott in Philadelphia.
Hey, Dave. Hey, Chris. How you doing?
Good. Hey, how you doing, Scott?
Good. Very well. Very well. Hey, Chris. I'm going to name, say, a half a dozen guys, and tell me how many of these 6 guys you would feel real good about trading clean wins with. Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Juventud Guerrera, Billy Kidman, Psychosis, Rey Mysterio Jr. Would you say 6?
Oh yeah, most definitely.
You know, and I really hope that that they realize that at the company, and that they, you know, in an era when there's a lot of people who are really concerned about being on the losing end. And I personally, in Japan, I thought it was amazing to watch Bam Bam Bigelow and how he could, you know, lose cleanly in the middle of the ring and get over stronger after the match, you know. And I think he was sort of a classic example of somebody who had an ability to do that. But
yeah,
a lot of people whine these days. But I think I've always been amazed. They've got an opportunity to have clean falls all the time with about at least probably a dozen guys in that area who would be happy to you know, trade them back and forth with each other.
Yeah, well, my perspective is from my experience in Japan. If you get enough time in the ring, it don't matter whether you win or lose. You know, you should be able to showcase your ability and get over that way. And from my experience in the States here, you know, if you're involved in a good storyline and it means something, it don't matter if you win or lose.
Wouldn't it be nice if you could sort of help to redefine, you know, unfortunately with this competitive television situation between the two big companies, you know, as Vince Russo was saying yesterday, there's a need in the matches to have it basically go spot, 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 and just keep moving. And he basically said anything more than a 15-second rest hold or, you know, slow point, people are changing channels. And so, you know, he was saying how in the WWF, that's how the boys are used to putting their matches together, where things are constantly happening. And I hope, you know, I think that longer matches, and by that I mean 10, 12, possibly 14, 15-minute matches, can happen as long as they move like that. And I just hope that you never lose that great psychology and the ability to work at a pace that makes sense, but yet sort of constantly, you know, have things happen. I think you're the classic example of who can do that and have long matches on television.
Yeah, it all depends where it fits in creatively also. I mean, you know, you could have these 5-minute matches, bang, 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 or these, you know, 20-minute matches. It's where it fits in creatively in the storyline that you're involved in. That makes a difference.
Yeah. Hey, just one specific person, Brad Armstrong. How would you feel about that?
I think he's extremely talented, and I think he's underused, and I think personally he's just been beaten down so long that he's lost a lot of, you know, faith in himself, and you know, but I think there's something hidden there that needs to be brought out, because I think he's a very extremely talented wrestler, and he's got a lot of character. He's like something waiting to explode.
You know, I think that, like, when it comes to the long matches, I think it's always, it's not, there's a context for everything. I think that, I saw, and granted, like, every era is different, but I remember, let's go back 10 years ago. Most television matches were not that long 10 years ago either. I mean, there was a period where, you know, most of these TV matches were 2, 3, 5 minutes. But every now and then we had a 20-minute match on television. Every now and then we had, you know, maybe once a year there would be a match that would go the whole TV show. I remember a Ric Flair Barry Windham match, and because it did, and because it was a break from the norm, everyone talked about it. And your match on Monday, I mean, by far, you know, this whole week is the most talked about thing on television as far as wrestling matches go. I mean, and it's because it was a break from the norm. And I think that, like, you know, there's rules in wrestling, and every rule at some point should be broken. That's the diversity of it.
Yeah, you know, I'm just giving you my perspective right now, but you know what I think in a wrestling show of nowadays, you know, I think those, you know, short matches are great, and like you said, every once in a while throw in a long match. But, you know, I think to keep the people captivated, because there's so many different wrestlers, there's so many different characters, there's so many different styles. You show those short, explosive matches, but, you know, every once in a while it's good to throw in one of those long matches.
Let's go to Ada in Baltimore right now.
Hey guys, hey Chris. I was just wondering, I don't know if you talked about this, but what do you personally think of Russo and Ed Ferreira coming to the World Championship Wrestling? Because I think it may help out WCW in the long run.
Well, I think WCW definitely needs change. I'm glad to see them come. Personally, I don't know them. I've never worked with them before, but I welcome change here because we obviously need to do something.
I think. Oh, sorry. Well, I think the biggest concern is now that WCW might go away from a really wrestling aspect to more of a sports entertainment aspect with the WWF, because if you know that Vince Russo actually was one of the guys who helped research the WWF, but it was more, he did a more sports entertainment-ish approach and not a wrestling approach.
Yeah, but you're talking about guys that are dealing in the business now, and I'm sure Vince Russo and Ferrara, they're smart enough to fine-tune it as they go along, and if they see something not working, they're going to change it and make it work. And that's what was wrong with our show for so long. There were certain things that were so obviously wrong, and they never changed. We're talking about some different guys here that have done tremendous amount of business for WWF, and they're coming into WCW now. I'm sure they'll fine-tune whatever they have to fine-tune. I hope they do. I'm looking forward to meeting them and sitting down and talking to them and discussing what their plans are.
Let's go to someone from your neck of the woods, and this is we've been doing this show for 1 week, and this is our first international caller, Steve from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. How you doing, Steve?
Good. First off, I'd like to say hello to Chris, and I'd like to ask him a couple questions. I've been a follower of his since his early Stampede Wrestling days. I remember him walking around the ring when he was a young boy there, and I'm just thoroughly impressed with what he's been able to accomplish the last 10, 12 years. One question I'd like to ask you, Chris, is I don't know if you remember or not, but back in '87 at World's Gym when you had a little altercation with Johnny Smith there, I used to work out there, and I saw you guys going at it.
Inside of World's Gym?
It was World's Gym on 58th Avenue. I guess I'm going back too far, but
I don't think I've always been.
It looked like it was a genuine feud that you two had there, not only in the ring but out of the ring.
Pardon me?
It sounded like it was a genuine feud you had in the ring and out of the ring.
No, I don't believe that ever happened with Johnny Smith.
With Johnny Smith? Okay. Anyway, the other question is, I've been listening to you talk on the radio shows for the last little while, and of all the wrestlers out there, I have the utmost respect on the way you answer and you treat all your fans and your hosts.
Oh, thank you very much.
I'd like to wish you the best of success and luck, and hopefully one day WCW will be coming to Calgary again, or coming to Calgary once.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see them go to Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Regina, Saskatoon. I'd like to see them hit the Western provinces.
For all your fans to see you in action again.
I'd love to come out there. I don't know why they haven't gone out there yet. I thought they'd go out there for sure when Brett first came to WCW. And
for sure, it's untapped territory up here. Come on up.
Banging my head on the wall when they didn't take advantage of that.
Yeah, especially remember that show in Toronto was the first show in Toronto to me was such a huge success.
Yeah.
I mean that was one of the most lively crowds they ever had for a Nitro, packed house, huge gate. And you see that, and it's like there's plenty of other cities in that country that would have welcomed Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver. Those are all pretty hot wrestling cities right now.
Well, especially now in the States for WCW, a lot of our house shows are down. I mean, a lot of our house shows are less than half of what they were at one time of what I've seen, and I think to go up there, I mean, you go up into Canada where it's totally virgin territory for WCW. I think it's a great opportunity. I don't understand why they don't take advantage of it.
The other thing I'd like to say is this, following wrestling as long as I have. My dad used to be Stu Hart's mechanic back in the 60s. I've been following it a long time. Wrestlers come and go, game plans come and go, storylines come and go. But what keeps this sport so great is the true talent of the professionals. And I think it's just a short phase that it's sports entertainment now, but the wrestling will in the near future. People are getting tired of this crap. We want to see the athletes go at it. And
I think there's always going to be a part of wrestling where you have the best athletes are always going to rise to the top, but there's always going to be entertainment because it's just inherent in. And the entertainment's going to get wilder and wilder. If you go back to the 50s, it looks very tame compared to now, and it's just an evolution process. Wrestling's going to be, it's always going to be edgy entertainment, but the great athletic ability is always going to be appreciated by a lot of the fans, especially I think when you have fans that have been fans for more than, like the first year or two, I think people are drawn in by just the craziness and the wildness of it. But once you're a fan about 3 years, you all of a sudden start noticing, this match is good and this match isn't, and why is it? And that's why those kind of guys will always rise, hopefully to the top, but certainly close to the top.
Well, I won't take any more of your time. It's been the pleasure's been all mine, and I'll keep listening to your show and pass the word around up in Calgary here.
Okay, thanks very much. Chris, did you ever see the Wrestling with Shadows documentary?
Yeah, several times.
Okay, what did you think of? What did you think of it as far as a movie? What did you think of it as far as everything that went down? Or if you really, because to me it was when I first saw it, the one thing that I have to say is it was the first thing I had ever seen produced on wrestling where when I watched it, I said, that's really wrestling. I mean, it's like good and bad. That's really wrestling. I thought they got a real essence of, and you know that family, better than I do. And it's quite an interesting thing. You've been in the house and everything like that. I thought it was a well-produced documentary.
Yeah, I thought it was great. And I'm being a wrestling fan. It's hard for me to say, but just in watching it, I'd imagine even people that aren't wrestling fans could get into the story of it behind it. And I thought it was very, well put together, well done. I've watched it several times, and I'm certainly going to watch it several more times.
Yeah. Now, what actually, when you were starting out, what, about age of 17 with Stampede Wrestling, 18 maybe?
Yeah, my first match I was 18. I started going down to Stu's about 17.
And about a year later, you got your first break to Japan. How did that materialize? You were just working the Stampede circuit with Keith and Bruce Hart, and had Owen started? Or did you actually start before Owen?
I started before Owen.
Okay, you started you started, then you went to Japan, and that's about when Owen and Brian Pillman broke in, right around that time when you were in Japan, right?
Yeah.
What got you to Japan?
Tokyo Joe, who's an agent. He lives in Calgary, and he's an agent for New Japan Pro Wrestling because of the history of Stampede. I mean, they had so many Japanese wrestlers come through there. They did a lot of work with sending wrestlers over. Dynamite and Davey and Brett and Bruce had all gone over there, and Tokyo Joe lived in Calgary, and him and Bad News Allen actually put the deal together for me. Bad News was going to Japan quite regularly back then, and they both approached me and asked me if I'd like to go over there and train, and I was just all over it.
Because it's not like no one's ever done it. Because I know Brian Adams, Daryl Peterson, there are probably a couple of other guys when you were there that were training in Japan, but it wasn't usual either. It wasn't like a lot of guys got that chance.
No, it was a very unusual opportunity, and having growing up as a teenager watching all these tapes from Japan of Dynamite over there and Davey and Brett and all the heroes that I'd watched for years, I thought this is something that I'd really like to do.
Okay, Chris, we've got to go to a break. The producer wants to talk to you, wants to get a little bit of information on you. And, Chris, I want to thank you very much for being here, for answering the questions, as directly as you did and everything. And everyone that, called in, I think they really appreciate talking to you. And, the best of luck. I hope that the change with Vince Russo, he was on the show yesterday. He was very much praising you, Eddie Guerrero, Ernest Miller, and Buff Bagwell were the ones that he said were the ones that he thought he could really take to the top of the company. And I hope in your case he really delivers on that one because, you've worked hard for this for 14, 15 years and without complaining or anything like that. You've done your job night after night under good circumstances and bad. And I as a fan, I've always appreciated, watching your matches.
Thank you very much. That's a nice compliment. Thank you.